welcome to this week's episode of Beyond Motherhood. Today we're going to be chatting all things around loss of identity in motherhood and how we can actually start to rediscover ourselves in and our identity in motherhood and outside of being a mama. Um, and it's such an interesting conversation, and I love chatting about this because it's been such a journey for me in more recent times over the last couple of years, particularly. But upon reflection, there's been so many shifts over the years, shedding of identities, reclaiming new identities since becoming a mother. And yeah, it's just such a great topic to chat about and speak to, and just thinking of my own experiences. But when we become mothers, we are just thrust into a whole new world and we form a completely new identity, especially as first time mothers when we have our babes and we are just like, wow, I am responsible for this tiny human. And we have to learn so many things, not only how to look after our babies, but learn so much about ourselves in the process. And becoming a mother does change who we are. It does change our identity in so many ways. And especially in those early years, especially in, the first 2 years, the newborn stage and the baby stage, we are in it. We are in it. We are sleep deprived. We are navigating so much within becoming a mother, or if it's our second child, becoming having an additional little human in our lives. Um, each stage, each season brings with it so much that we learn about our identity. We might grieve our past identity, which is totally normal because we are in many ways losing who we once were. If we were, a single person, or even when we were a couple before we had kids, our lives looked so different in so many ways. So we are losing that identity, and it can be a grieving process for us. And even now, sometimes after being a mother for nearly 10 years, which is crazy to believe, even now, I think back of when I was a single person or without children and reminisce about those days, and sometimes do feel sad and do miss those times. In many ways don't. But our lives were so much different before having kids. Our identity was so much different. And it's okay to grieve those parts of ourselves that we no longer have, that no longer serve us in many ways. But it's also okay, and we'll chat about as well, it's also okay to rediscover a new you and to form a new identity as a woman outside of the mother. And that is something that's been huge for me this past year, particularly. So when, we all go through this loss of identity, and that as when we become mothers, and that can be through a whole host of reasons, but we have to start prioritizing our child's needs. They're so dependent on us when they're babies and in those early years, especially, and it can often lead to neglecting our own personal interests, our own aspirations, our personal hygiene for many of us in those early newborn days where it's all a blur. You haven't showered for God knows how long. You're lucky if you've had a meal that morning or brushed your teeth. So we do neglect ourselves because we do have to prioritize our kids, and we do have to make those sacrifices in that season of our lives. And that's okay. That is okay. But there can be that overemphasis on caregiving, even as we move past, those early years when our kids are starting to grow up and be a little bit more independent themselves. There can still be that overemphasis of caregiving, and it is such an important piece, no doubt. And it can still lead to that neglecting of self, not prioritizing yourself. And that's when we can start to really lose our sense of self and sense of identity as a woman, as a person, a human being outside of the mother. And then also comes with that career shifts. If you're going from full-time work to then being at home with your with your baby for whatever period of time. For some people, maybe you don't go back to full-time work, or maybe you stay home for a few years. That can be a really big loss of identity. Our careers, when we go from being really focused and career driven, and maybe you're not anymore, and that's okay as well, but maybe you still are, but you're finding it really that push pull of, you know, do I still want to be career driven, or should I be? And a lot of that societal expectations that come as mothers, and that traditional motherhood, and that we feel that pressure to conform to. So all of these things can contribute to that loss of identity and feeling like we're losing ourselves in motherhood. And as I mentioned, yeah, those societal expectations, there's so much pressure on mothers to look and be a particular way, to take everything on, to, be the primary caregiver, and also go back to work and be, earning money for the family, and all the things. But we still have to, it's like we're working three full-time jobs in many ways, because we're having to do all the things for the kids and be the default parent, as well as earning an income and providing for the family as well. So there's so many expectations on mothers, even more so these days. And unfortunately, because of the economy, many of us have to work, even if we would prefer to be staying at home with our babies. So there can be so many contributing factors in how we lose our identity, and through these social expectations, through the overemphasis on caregiving, and not prioritizing ourselves in any way, and through the shifts and changes that might come from our jobs and our careers. So it's important to know, and those on the video, my light, oh, there we go, it's died. But anyway, if it goes dark, apologies. But there are ways that we can start to, as we come out of some of those earlier years, we're starting to feel a little bit more like we have the capacity to think about ourselves again, think about what the things that might bring us a bit of joy and that we might like to do for ourselves, and we can start to rediscover our identity outside of motherhood, as a woman, as a human being. And a lot of that really, as I said, comes down to finding out maybe what your purpose is and what the things that bring you joy. Looking at your self-care, and that can be small things, big things, in between things, pursuing your interests. Like, that's been a huge one for me. And to be honest, my interests have changed so much since I was younger. So you might even be thinking, I have no bloody idea what my interests are anymore, because I've just been this role of being mum, being, at home with my kids, prioritizing their needs, not even thinking about myself and looking at my own needs. Like, where do I even start? And it can really be a bit of trial and error. It can be sitting down and just thinking, what are things that used to bring me joy? What are things that brought me joy and I loved doing as a kid? What are things that I did enjoy doing previously to becoming a mum? Does that really still resonate with me now? Is it something I'm still interested in? And it might be a no. So sometimes it might be a bit of trial and error, and being brave enough to just go out there and try different things if you can. For me, it's been dancing and rediscovering my music, because it's something that I totally forgot about. I wasn't playing music for myself and for my own joy and fulfillment. And the last year, it's been something that I've really started to do again: singing, playing my guitar, even getting back into playing the piano a little bit. Things I do for myself and not for anyone else. And as I said, getting back into dancing, and that was a bit of trial and error for me as well. I did hip hop dancing probably a couple of years ago, and I initially enjoyed it, but then circumstances happened. They changed teachers. I wasn't really vibing with the teacher and the demographic of people that were there, and I stopped doing it. And then was always interested in like burlesque dancing and heels dancing, and that side of things, as a way for me to lean into my own sexuality and sensuality as a woman. Because yes, it's okay to discover those things as a mother, because we are women as well, who have needs, who have desires. So finding a class, and I found a class after doing a little bit of research and putting feelers out there, and I've been doing it for 6 months now, and I absolutely love it, and it has changed my life in a lot of ways. It's helped build my confidence. I've connected with like-minded women. mothers who are all there to support each other. So, again, finding something that stands out for you, that you enjoy, that's going to bring you joy, that's going to give you some sort of purpose and identity outside of motherhood. And yeah, like I said, trial and error. It might be trying to find something, and that might not be your thing, and that's okay. So just sitting with that, being in that inquiry and becoming curious and exploring, like that's the fun part of it, really. And I slightly hinted at, but maintaining connections, like through my dancing I've made new connections, but maintaining social connections with your friends and nurturing those relationships and those friendships and engaging in social activities, outside of mums groups are amazing, don't get me wrong, like I loved my mums group when I was like, we had my two boys when they were babies. But then I did a Mums at Bubs yoga class, and yes, that was for me as well, and I loved that. But again, if we can do something without our kids, God love them, but if we can have that one-on-one, that quality time with our friends without the kids, because let's face it, when you're with your kids and your friends, like every 5 seconds you feel like you're being interrupted. But there's a time and place for that, but there's also a time and place for you to get out, have a girls' lunch, have a coffee, go to your friend's house or whatever it is, and have some quality interaction and connection, because it is so important not to do this in isolation. And when we have those social connections outside of being a mother, it is going to help us support us in our own identity. Know that, I've got these friendships, I've got these connections that aren't related to motherhood in any way. And of course, you might talk about your kids and whatnot, but being able to have those social catch ups is so, so, so important in not only our mental health, but just knowing that we are a human being outside of a mother as well. Um, and yeah, as I said, pursuing interests and self care. And I mean, that goes without saying, but self care can be tricky. It depends how you look at it. I always like to say, I look at it as how we can nourish ourselves and how we can connect deeper with ourselves. It's great to go and do things like getting your hair done, getting a pedi, having a massage, but those things don't happen all the time, let's face it. And in the economy today, like it can be expensive to do these things on a regular basis. So it's about finding ways that we can connect within, we can help to regulate our nervous system, we can help to just prioritize our needs in a way that we can do it on the daily, that we can weave things throughout our day that aren't going to necessarily take a long time. It can be a few minutes here and there. And I've spoke about this on a previous podcast, which I think was my first podcast episode. So go back and listen to that in more depth. But it's about how we can look after ourselves in a way that is sustainable and is going to benefit us from a mental health level, benefit us from a nervous system regulation level, and from a spiritual level as well. You don't have to be a quote unquote spiritual person, but when you can connect with yourself, whether it's meditating, whether it's just journaling, that is connecting with your spirituality, connecting with your soul. For me, music is such a spiritual piece as well. And it is for many people. So there are ways that we can connect within, with our mind, with our body, with our soul, that is going to help us feel nourished, nurturing ourselves, and filling up our cups as well in many ways. And also just continuing to reflect and be in that inquiry, like what our goals and our aspirations and our dreams, like they were for many, I'm sure, were so right there for you before you became a mother, things that you wanted to strive for. And sometimes they get lost in motherhood. We lose those things and have a little bit of a think, like, what do I actually want to achieve in my life? What are some things that I want to align with that bring me a sense of fulfillment and purpose? And that might look completely different to what it was pre-motherhood. And I know for me it is completely different. So it's just about being in that continuous self-reflection and inquiry about what your dreams are, what your personal goals are, what your aspirations are in different areas of your life, whether it's, your your physical health or your mental health or your career or your business or whatever it is, like those things that are part of our identity as women, as humans that are outside of motherhood, but are still so, so important to reflect on and to think about because they are part of our identity, and that's also how we can rediscover ourselves. Because I know for me, like before I became a mother, my career, doing what I was at the time, was really, really important. And after I had my youngest, it became, I don't want to say less important because I love what I do, but in that particular environment that I was in government work, I realized that wasn't something that I wanted to do long term anymore for various reasons. But things changed, my goals changed, where I saw myself and wanted to do with my life, and how I wanted to live my life, have more freedom and flexibility, and all those things to not only be there for my kids, but to do more things for myself. And I have more of that flexibility now because I made it happen. And, definitely hasn't been easy, but just to highlight that our goals and our aspirations and our dreams do change. And again, that is totally okay as well. But it does form a huge part of who we are and how we are going to live our lives as well, as mothers and as women. So, there are a few things just to think about in terms of how you can not only rediscover yourself as the woman outside of the mother, but just to know that we all go through these shifts. We all go through this loss of identity in motherhood because it can feel all consuming at times. It can feel like we're just Groundhog Day in and out, wondering where the day went, where the weeks went, and then realizing, like, what have I actually done for myself? Who am I? Like, we can have these questions, and I know I have from time to time, like, who the hell am I outside of being a mother? Because I feel like that's all I do. And as beautiful and rewarding as it can be, it is okay to want a life and to want to have an identity outside of your role as a mother. So know that it is okay to have that desire, to have those needs and those wants outside of being a mother. It is completely okay, and something that it took me a little while to feel okay with, but I can honestly say, like, I'm totally okay with having my own identity as a woman and having my role as a mother as well, because we can have both. We honestly can have both. So I hope this episode has spoken to you and has resonated with you, and I look forward to seeing you in next week's episode.